We've all done the worst kinds of things just to stay alive. But we can still come back. We're not too far gone. We get to come back. I know. We all can change.
We can all change. These are the final dramatic words that restore the faith that The Walking Dead's Herschel Green once had for humanity. It's a very tender moment for Herschel, who has spent his entire life devoted to the idea of faith, and the notion that people can change, whether that be morally or spiritually. His actions and words have had an influence on the series' protagonist Rick Grimes, who in this moment believes that there is still light at the end of the tunnel. In a world torn apart by ravenous creatures and reshaped by the desperation of human beings, there are still those that rekindle a sense of hope for the future. This optimism is noble and needed to keep us going in times of stress and despair, but the unfortunate truth is that we all succumb to the reality of what actually exists. What I mean by this is that we all want to feel some sense of belief during times of hardship, but when we inevitably look back at the subject causing us the pain to begin with, the illusion of hope is shattered. In Cormac McCarthy's post-apocalyptic novel The Road, about a dying Earth and a father and son who seek even the delusion of hope, hits us with a very bleak and disheartening outlook at what life would be like if everything we depended on ceased to exist, or at the very least, an aggressively pessimistic interpretation of mankind's selfishness. As one extract goes, he walked out into the grey light and stood, and he saw for a brief moment the absolute truth of the world, the cold, relentless circling of the untested earth, darkness implacable. The Road is post-apocalyptic. The downfall of mankind has already occurred, so the book focuses on piecing together the ambiguous fragments of what is left. Whereas McCarthy's novel refuses to give us any reassurance that hope is still out there, The Walking Dead takes a more devolving approach to the subject matter. The Road is a representation of the inevitable end that The Walking Dead is working towards. The next time you watch or read The Walking Dead, just think of what McCarthy describes, and it completely removes any illusion of a happy ending, something which both the viewer and the characters desperately want. It's a show with a deliberately directionless narrative. The Walking Dead toys with the idea of hope. Characters are relieved at the potential for a safe haven to exist, but what they encounter are more problems that ultimately go unresolved, forcing them to move on under the dwindling assumption that next time will be better. The story becomes a process of trial and error. Each time they encounter a new location or group of people, their actions and instincts improve, albeit in increasingly hostile ways. Unlike most zombie or post-apocalyptic fiction that we love, The Walking Dead has the advantage of longevity. We are watching the transformation process, the devolvement of humanity. In earlier scenarios, the characters would attempt to approach a situation rationally and in the most socially acceptable way possible. For example, when they approach Herschel's farm, they ease their way into the settlement by gaining trust through helpful labour and rapport, but after the Barnhouse massacre, Rick prepares to shoot down strangers rather than build a friendly relationship. When they fail to work as a democracy, leading to the death of the show's optimistic character Dale, as well as the downfall of Herschel's farm, Rick resorts to a dictatorship. Do you see the trend that's emerging? The trial and error process of the story becomes a vicious cycle. The group attempt to act civilized, but what results is death, destruction, and deception, leading to more violent or aggressive responses to reflect their frustration, after which they go back to their old ways in an attempt to find a peaceful solution to maintain any fragment of hope left in humanity, but rarely does this happen. In fact, the longer the story goes on, their attempt at peace becomes less and less prevalent. No encounter or problem has ever ended peacefully or rationally. For example, while peacefully trying to exchange for Beth, everything goes calmly and orderly, but in a fit of frustration, Beth violently assaults Dawn, resulting in both their deaths. It's an annoying conclusion for both characters because neither death was necessary, but it goes to show how devolved humans have become. The reason peace becomes less prevalent is because people have realized that peace usually results in death or negative consequences. It points to the significance that Rick has to the story. As a police officer, he is the voice of law and order, so in theory, judgment and justification land squarely in his hands. Rick is in a position where it's literally his job to maintain peace and prosperity. If a police officer was to go against their own code of ethics and honor, then the legal system has completely failed, and in real life that's not uncommon, making us question the people in charge of maintaining order in society. But what's frightening is how constant Rick's responsibility is scrutinized not only by characters, but also by us, just like how we criticize the police and state today. I mean, just look at Making a Murderer, for example. Rick's continuous emotional and mental decline reflects the depleting social order. In other words, whereas before Rick would usually talk things over and attempt to resolve a conflict peacefully like any good police officer would, seeing that everybody's answers are at the barrel of a gun, Rick has submitted to this primitive action as well. It's an easy answer when there is no structure in place for a normal society to operate. Criminologists James Wilson and George Kelling introduced the concept of broken windows theory in 1982, which argued that if a building had a few broken windows that went unfixed, it encourages people to break more windows because a trend has already been established. You can apply the same theory to the world of The Walking Dead. As normal people shoot and kill others, a trend is established. In this case, broken windows is the equivalent to murder. As a result, other people feel it's now a socially acceptable act, which will ultimately increase to the point where it becomes the norm, a functioning aspect of society. If nobody is stopping the violence, then it becomes an acceptable part of the world. In Rick's case, as somebody who polices the law, for him to commit the same act encourages the approval of its existence. Consequently, Rick reinforces the fact that laws and the legal system we once believed in no longer apply. He is supposed to be the acting role model of what we can and cannot do, so the increase in harsher methods of punishment and survival such as martial law begin to manifest in this new world order. If that doesn't make the devolvement of humanity depressing enough for you, let's go back to Rick's speech. At one point Rick declares, "We're not too far gone." It's a very iconic line that is also the title of the episode, which deliberately leaves out the word "not." When Rick finishes his speech, we see this smile on Herschel's face reinvigorating hope. But here's the tragic reality. The governor is actually captivated by Rick's speech and does seem to contemplate his thoughts, but as the camera cuts to a POV, he examines the sharp blade then stares at Rick, a small weak man behind an even weaker fence. He sees hope, only for the illusion to be shattered by the reality, reinforced by seeing it through his eyes. He proceeds to call Rick a liar and swipes the blade at Herschel's neck because he and Rick both know that they are in fact too far gone. The moment the governor kills Herschel is the moment that Rick truly transforms. He open fires, contradicting his own speech, making him out to be a hypocrite of his own words through violent actions, tragically nullifying the meaning behind it, and thus making Herschel's moral preaching worthless. Many would say that Rick's actions are justified as self-defense and an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but really in fact it's just revenge, a response that usually causes more harm than good if we're talking about reality. Beth's exchange echoes the same theme as the prison shootout. Nobody had to die, but Beth, a very innocent, sweet, humble character, has become morally disillusioned and desensitized by the act of violence, and dies as a result of her attempt at revenge. Violence is now a necessity. It always has been since the start of time. The Walking Dead is a story about survival, but also justifies the existence of violence as commonplace, bringing it back into tradition. In fact, it's not hard to see the parallels to the old Wild West. The reality is that hope is far from the truth. What we, as the audience, must come to realize is that things can only get worse as the show progresses, as these scenarios have presented, especially in how McCarthy describes it in his novel. The directionless tone of the show helps perpetuate the eventuality that everybody will inevitably and tragically meet their unlawful and cruel demise before humanity stops breathing once and for all. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please let us know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, please do hit that little subscribe button because we have a new video every Thursday. Next week, we're talking about the Batman Arkham video game series. So until next time, stay safe and I'll see you all very soon.